Hi everyone, another week, another live. I am your host, Geraldine Anello, and today I am here with Keith Levenson. Hey Keith.
Howdy.
How is it? Howdy. How is it
Howdy.
going?
It's going. We're hanging in there.
It's going and we're hanging in there. Everyone, if you're tuning in live, if the name Keith Levenson is ringing a bell, it is because the man has been working tirelessly behind the scenes, working for us all, the musicians community, and helping us sort out all things money and unemployment, none of which are the topic of today. However, do go check his name out so you can see his posts. They are very helpful. I am personally reading them and following the steps he recommends. But that aside, Keith Levenson is an incredible musician who has done a lot. And there is one thing I'm so excited to talk to you about, which is that you have been touring with a 50-piece orchestra. First of all, 50-piece orchestra, plus, because that started off, an 8-piece band. That's incredible. But that's not enough. Plus, The Who. Woo!
Woo! Who?
I mean, what an experience.
Except we don't travel with the orchestra. We pick up with the orchestra every day.
Well, you just, like, the stakes just went up.
And the rehearsal time just went up, too.
How did you get involved with that? What is that experience like?
It's exhilarating. It's exhausting. Because mostly we do a show, we have a day off, we do a show. And it's not a day off, it's a travel day. So it's show, well, rather orchestra rehearsal, sound check.
Wait, I'm going to want all the details. Orchestra rehearsal. How long? How many new people?
Well, we only carry our concertmaster, Katie Jacoby, and principal cellist, Audrey Snyder. So Katie and Audrey travel with me. We're like the little B team. And we usually get to the venue at around noon. Orchestra rehearsal is usually, we can do it in 2.5 hours now with breaks, which is pretty insane since we play 2 hours and 12 minutes of music.
Whew.
And then we have maybe 45 minutes. Then the band comes and they do a really quick sound check. And then we do maybe 2 numbers with the band and the orchestra. Then we sit there for an eternity while we have dinner. The catering is usually pretty good. We have dinner. We wait for the opening band to go on. We wait for them to get their equipment off. So by the time we're on stage, it's like 9 o'clock, 8:40, 9 o'clock. We have a little break in the middle of the show. It's not an intermission, though. The orchestra just leaves. 57 people just leave. And the band does sort of a 12-minute set on their own. And then we come back and do about another 45, 50 minutes.
So about that break, no hotels, huh?
No. Oh, yeah, hotels everywhere.
No, but you were saying the break between the sound check and the show.
Oh, going back to the hotel?
Yeah.
Not really. Well, you want to eat because it's free and it's and it's good. And sometimes the hotels, I mean, we play places where the hotels can be 40 minutes from the venue. Mm-hmm. And we can't, even with police escorts, we can't get in and out fast enough. Mm-hmm. It's not something you really want to risk.
How long have you been doing this for?
It goes back a couple. Well, I've known Roger since 1994. We did a tour called Daltrey Sings Townsend, and it was most of the Who band without Pete Townsend, and we did that. We did, I think, 38 shows in about 48 days. And then I've continued to work with Roger kind of as his MD when he does orchestra work for the last 25 years. So summer of 2018, he decided he wanted to do Tommy, Orchestral Tommy, available on Universal Records and CDs. So we did essentially the same model. We did Tommy top to bottom, picked up orchestras every day, and it was really successful. Um, so after that stopped, which was sort of the fall of 2018, um, Roger talked Pete into the idea of doing The Who with symphonies. So we started, and he was very reticent, very, very reticent, because he's never, though he's done a lot of orchestral work, he's never done The Who with an orchestra. And for a guitar player that kind of is used to shredding and not so much married to a form, that was a big leap for him to make. Excuse the pun. You know, it was like, oh, wait a minute, I have to play it the same amount of bars every night. And so we went our rehearsal period. So we rehearsed last April of 2019 for in West Palm for a week in a studio that wasn't air conditioned, so it was kind of unbearable, and it didn't make anybody's moods any better. And it was our entire production. We travel 60 people, and that's without an orchestra. That's our crew, and that's us. Anyway, the first 10 days or so was really just scary. And I kept going home every night thinking, wow, they're going to cancel this.
Scary as far as
Pete's, the fact that the two key people, Pete Townsend and Zach Starkey, our drummer, had never done this kind of show before. They hadn't done, because this isn't like when you go see some bands and they have an orchestra and you're kind of playing footballs and just like whole notes for 8.5 hours. These charts, which were mostly written by David Campbell, who's Beck's father, are really hard. They really take work, and it's an orchestra, so you can't just do whatever you want. And trying to be, so I became I think part of my job is translator. You know, it's as much translator as it is conductor, because they don't read, and the orchestra doesn't really. They obviously don't play from lead sheets, or I mean, they play the ink, right? So when they get away from the ink, it's challenging up there.
What do you do? I mean, does that actually, from the way your story was going, I was under the impression it all got settled in, but now it sounds like you still sometimes have to figure out what to do when your front band changes the form and you've got 50 people to wrangle at once.
It never settles in.
Woo! That's the rockstar life right there.
It is never the same show.
Wait, do you have a contingency plan? Do you tell your 50 members, if at any point something goes wrong, here's what you do?
Well, that would be fine if it were predictable. You could say that, but it's not.
Do you at least tell them something will be different and to watch out for that?
Yes,
or you just let them kind of figure it out?
No.
You guys try your best.
The thing that I say probably 20 times a rehearsal is,
good luck.
Watch Pete. That too. Watch Pete for every ending, because we will put buttons upon buttons, and then solos, and then more buttons. And so what you have to do is, when you see his final, and sometimes he fakes me out just because he kind of likes to screw around with me. When you see his final leap, that's when it's really over. And I would say there are 5 or 6 really big pieces that end that way. And sometimes he absolutely just ignores me, and because he knows he can. So after a few shows where I would go home and cry at night, thinking that it was totally my fault that this all got screwed up, I sort of thought, but wait a minute, we got through this. No one died, as far as I know.
At least not because of you.
Not because of me. And in some cases, I've avoided major train wrecks. And of course, I've Katie on on stage right to help me, and Audrey on stage left to sort of help me. And we're also, our setup is very strange. I'm right next to Pete, all the way stage left. So if you're in the violin, if you're like in the violin 2 section, you might as, and there's no video of me.
Oh
So
my
if you're in the
God.
violin 2 section, or like the harp, um, you might as well be in another arena.
Now, who made those calls? Who decided, let's have a different 50-piece orchestra at every venue? And who decided, while we try to do that, which is already difficult, let's also not have any cameras or videos
Well,
and put the
obviously,
conductor off center?
the easy answer to that is not a musician. But no, in terms of the stage setup, our production manager, who's been with the Who for at least 50 years, he was just like, "This is the way it has to be," and I'm in no position to argue. In terms of the orchestras, picking up different orchestras, that's simply the financial aspect of it. You couldn't possibly travel a 57-person union orchestra, across the country.
Do you
I
have
mean,
a
I
say?
guess you
Do you
could.
have a say in any of the hiring? Do you know people? Do you check the list with the contractors? Do you hire the contractors?
I have a national contractor who is he's not employed by Live Nation. We actually pay him, but I can put a list together in any city that I want, where they'll request whoever I want,
Mhm.
or at least they'll say they're requesting whoever I want. In Madison Square Garden and Jones Beach, it was like having a group of 58 friends. I mean, I knew almost everybody. And then since I've been on the road for 40 years, I know a lot of people in cities, so it's nice to see some familiar faces sometimes.
You think of it as you being on the road for 40 years. You've mostly traveled the whole time.
Mostly.
Was that a choice or a discovery along the way, or it just happened that way?
I think it just happened that way because sort of my first job was as associate conductor on the First National Big River. And I think when you've been on the road, when you are on the road, people tend to think, they say that's what you do. You're a road dog. You're a road guy, and it's true. And I think contractors have always known that I'd be ready to get on the plane or get on the bus or whatever it is.
Did you ever want not to? Did you ever want to stay for a while?
Well, when I was conducting Annie on Broadway, I would have loved to stay there forever because you know it's so much easier to work on Broadway. Um, you don't have to rehearse a new orchestra every week. You can sub out yourself. Um, with Annie, we had a particularly great uh, performance schedule. We had Mondays and Tuesdays off. We did
What?
we did two Wednesday, one Thursday, one Friday, two Saturday, two Sunday.
That's unheard of.
And now Sunday night was the overtime show, right? The second show on Sunday was the overtime show, which would be the only time that I would see the real orchestra. Um, and then I did some really naughty things, like feeding a pit of 22 people during the show.
What did you feed them?
There's
When it comes to
probably
food, I always need the
there,
details, as James
there
St.
may
Clear
be
knows.
there may be one person watching this who we went anywhere from sea bass from 22
Yes, sea bass for
to,
28 people.
Chinese. I think it was the smell of the pizza that finally got us busted, because I
Wait,
think
so you
that
did
for
that for how long?
every Sunday night, because that's when I'd see all the regulars. The rest of the week, either I wasn't there or they weren't there.
I'm just going to make an aside here for all our non-New Yorkers. The way it works on Broadway is that until very recently, if you worked the Sunday evening show, if you had two shows on Sunday, the evening show, you were paid time and a half. And it did not matter if it was your chair or if you were coming in as a sub, you were paid time and a half. And so it's usually the show, because New York musicians can sub out 50% of the time. There's such a big turnover. So the Sunday night show is usually the one where the chair members are all there at the same time. But the last change that the union did was that now you only get your time and a half if you've played both shows that day. So it's changed a little. But
I didn't even know that.
It only changed, I think, in the past 6 months to a year. So now you must do the 2 shows to get the second time and a half.
Oh, that stinks.
Yeah, but so that's why you were able to have all your members there and feed them.
And then have 2 days off.
That's amazing.
And if you played your cards right, you could also take Wednesday off. So you could essentially work Thursday through Sunday, get 6 shows in plus the time and a half show, and have 3 days off.
Somebody in the comments is going, shh, oh, shh. So let's move on back to Annie. We shall not know that people are eating in pits or taking shows off. New York musicians are really hard worker. When they take time off, it's usually to go work on another show and to keep artistically fed and thriving in the community, just so we're clear. How did you get involved with Annie?
I had been involved in an ASCAP workshop with Janine Tesori, who was my ex-wife, but we weren't ex-wives and husbands then. And we wrote a musical. I think it was then called Galileo, later called Star-Crossed. And Martin Charnin was on the panel. It's when Charles Strauss used to run that workshop, the ASCAP workshop, and it was Monday nights. And on our night where we presented our 3 songs, Martin was on the panel. Everyone else on the panel hated the show. I mean, like with great passion, they hated it. And Martin not only loved it, but he kind of attacked the other people. I'm not going to mention who they are, because they're around. But so we began to develop Galileo, which he directed at Goodspeed. I had done a lot of work at Goodspeed Opera House, and I was in the middle of doing I think I was doing a production of Superman up there, which was also Strauss's show. And so Martin came to me and he said, I'll get you out of Goodspeed. Do you want to come be the MD and orchestra of Annie 2? So I actually did Annie 2 and all its incarnations before I ever did Annie 1. But it was from meeting Martin at the ASCAP workshop and then Charles working at Goodspeed that my very, very long relationship with Annie
I love it. Somebody just wrote a little, oh, please finish up. I'm sorry.
No, the little redheaded girl has been very good to me.
What do you mean?
Just a lot of years of employment.
I see.
I counted up once. I've conducted more than 3,500 performances of Annie.
That sure is a lot. Is that the most you've ever done?
Of any one show?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's like almost 6 years of your life if you put it together. Mm-hmm. Not consecutively, but still, it's a little shocking.
You did it, though. You did do it.
Yeah.
We have a comment here from Joshua Harvey. This is not a question. He says, this is a story. On September 23rd, 2012, I applied to Keith when he was looking for an associate music director for a chorus line, and he sent me the kindest and most professional and simple response about him contacting someone just prior to me. But I never forgot. He took the time and courtesy to send a response. Kindness at all levels of the industry.
That's what I used to be nice.
I love messages like that because I think there's really something true about that people in the industry are wonderful people.
I think so too. I've never had any kind of envy or sort of that negative vibe about our industry
Yeah.
at all.
And I think it shows. I also want to talk about your website, because on your website you have these amazing photos of you with the Who, and you're in front of, I mean, what's the maximum amount of people you've played in front of?
We played at Wembley Stadium. We played in front of close to 70,000 people.
What was that like?
Surreal, just surreal.
Now, I've talked to a lot of musicians who have played in stadiums, and what they often talk about is that what they notice the most is the level of sound coming from the audience.
You know something? I don't feel that so much because I'm so petrified.
Like la 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 la.
Dealing with what I have to deal with, and I have in-ears in, and I have the loudest guitar player who ever lived standing like 3 feet away from me with his wedges pointed right at me, that I don't think I could hear the crowd if there were 500,000 people there.
I mean, do you even hear anything at all outside of the guitarist?
I hear hi-hats. I hear toms. Occasionally I hear a little keyboards, not too much bass, and a lot of Roger's vocals, because I have to hear Roger's vocals.
Yeah. Those would be good indeed.
Yeah.
Well, your website is truly phenomenal. I loved watching it. I felt like I was, I mean, it just looks like such a rock star website, and I love it. You said that someone really close to you did it.
My wife did it.
Where did she learn to do websites like that? I mean, that's such a power move.
I think when you've been a graphic designer, all of your life, and you've worked in print is starting to kind of fade, as we all know. So if you want to remain vital, you become a website designer.
So if we want a website as good looking as yours, where do we go?
You go to www.kellydesigns, plural, Kelly, Kelly designs.org.
Great. I'll put it up so we can all find it. But also go check out Keith's website, everyone, because it's really awesome. Everyone, remember, we've got a fun virtual coffee meetup tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time, where we're just going to hang out and enjoy. So make sure you find that post or email me so you can join. Keith, thank you so much for joining us today.
This has been fun.
Thank you for your amazing career and showing us, making our dreams bigger, that we too can live the rock star life maybe one day.
Just stay calm.
Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for all you've been doing for the community the past few weeks in the transition. And as Catherine Kroll says, Keith, you rock. Oh, yeah.
Stay safe, everybody. Stay inside.
Bye, everyone, and bye, Keith.
Bye.